Minister Bennett, first question. I mean, obviously a lot of people are asking, does the Government of Canada agree with the commissioners that there is a cultural genocide going on when it comes to murdered and missing Indigenous women?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we agree with what the commissioners found, that this is about not only a loss of culture and pride and dignity, but a loss of life. That we heard even in the pre-inquiry, as you know, Martin, about the sexism and racism that actually led to people's deaths. They weren't found early. They weren't. That this is a vulnerable population that's been made worse by government policies and colonization. One of the academics said to me about, when the settlers arrived on this land, they would only speak to the men. The women had been running the communities, and they ended up disempowered. The Indian Act sent women to their husband's community instead of the husband going to the woman's community, where she would be protected by her brother and her uncle and her. This is a series of very bad colonial policies that have ended up with this tragedy.
Okay, but just on the genocide issue and that question, your colleague, for example, the Attorney General and Justice Minister, was grilled on that because it does have legal implications if the Government of Canada accepts the Commissioner's description of this as a genocide.
Well, I think that what is very, very
do you accept the term?
Upsetting today is that we have a responsibility now to go forward. The job of the Commission was to look at the historical causes, but also to give us a roadmap for change, to stop concrete actions to stop this terrible tragedy. And so that's why the call for a national action plan to be done with our partners, First Nations, Inuit, Métis, Indigenous women-led, is going to be really important as we go forward with our partners to develop an action plan. That's what the families asked me years ago. They wanted justice for their loved one, they wanted support and healing, and they wanted concrete actions to make sure that this tragedy would stop, that no other family should actually have to go through what they had to go through.
Some of the families are skeptical, though, that they're going to see concrete action soon. The Prime Minister says this is a report that will not gather dust. He says inaction is no longer an option. But, you're only months away from an election. Concretely, what can you say to those families is going to happen over the next few weeks and months?
So I think that we said right from the beginning that we weren't going to wait for the final report. And so the kind of work that we've been doing, even after the interim report, more money for healing, more money for the RCMP to develop a special unit, for the kind of commemoration that will be required. But the legislation on changing child and family services, this is something that we heard at almost every pre-inquiry gathering and at the gathering. The attachment to a child and family service where children are ripped out of their homes, no longer raised proud of their culture, in their language. And so I think we've begun, but as the Prime Minister said, we've got a lot more work to do. But I think, as the Commission said, it has to be done in partnership with our partners who will nothing about us without us, that we will work with our partners to make sure that there is a real roadmap for change.
One concrete question. There were interviews, you gave interviews after the leaks came out of this report, and they were about one of the recommendations, and that suggests the commissioners would like to see Indigenous identity taken into account in sentencing. And you were quoted in the National Post as saying you don't think that, or you're getting a lot of pushback and there's a lot of doubt as to whether that's a good idea. So you were seen as dismissing that idea.
Well, I think that what we had heard was people are concerned about anything that would be portrayed as a mandatory minimum. And there's been some discomfort with that, but we will work with our partners and look at all the calls to justice.
Just a last question. A last question is a general one. One of the complaints about this government, and now it's a hurdle you face, is the huge expectations that have been created. You have a commission here with 251 or whatever calls to action. There's a lot of expectations now on this government.
There needs to be goals. There needs to be targets. I think we're very proud that we've been very ambitious in what we knew had to change in the relationship with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. It meant that we're 80% through the meaningful action on the calls to action out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. All government departments are working together, and today we have a commitment that we will work with all the provinces and territories to really make further progress, because this has got to turn the page on the relationship with Indigenous people and change the patriarchate into a real partnership.
Minister Bennett, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.